Number one is communication. I mean, build a team and build it early, right? I mean, it's the clients I watch get in trouble are the ones who involve educated, known professionals who know what they're doing in terms of valuing things and understanding what a good rate versus a bad rate, or what may be very, very nuanced terms. Anyone who signed a college apartment lease thinks they understand what a lease says. But once you're dealing with fit out, build out, maintenance obligations, triple net leases where there's going to be allocations of costs, it adds up very, very quickly. And I mean, too often people come to the lawyer, and this may be very, very self-serving, and they say, look, I have a term sheet signed, write me a lease. And we go through it, and then instantaneously, there's 15 questions we have. And those things are still negotiable at that point. But I mean, build that team and build it early.
Welcome to Why Am I Talking? A podcast where the guests are so good, you'll wonder why the host is even talking. In each episode, you will hear one of the leaders of the Lehigh Valley's vibrant business hub. They will tell you the keys to their success, the mistakes they've made, and what they have in store for the future. Here is the host of Why Am I Talking? From YMI Insurance, Jimmy Honachik.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. This is a great crowd. This is our fourth Executive Edge. They have been great. We've done everything from employment practices to tariffs to something catered just to the restaurant industry, pun intended. But FLB does an incredible job. So Andrea and Jen, thank you guys for putting these together. And Notch is obviously a great location. So thanks to Notch for having us. Usually, I go through and I read off the awesome things about the panel, but it's really boring to listen to me. So today we're going to let everyone kind of talk about themselves. And then we're also going to let you guys talk a little bit about yourselves. So where are you from? Just so we can cater the conversation to you guys. So it'll be hopefully a little more interactive. So why don't we kick things off right here?
Sure. My name is Steph Cowell. I'm a shareholder in the firm's real estate and land development group. I handle leasing, acquisitions, and land development. Land development only in Pennsylvania, but real estate and acquisitions east of the Mississippi. Fun fact, I don't know if you guys know this, and this comes into drafting leases. Repairs are really important. You'll hear me talk about that later. But in Alabama, for example, in some parts, when they get excited, they shoot guns in the air. So bullet entry from the sky into the ceilings, roof is a thing down there that you need to account for. Who knew? But real estate has allowed me to learn interesting things like that. And I might even move west of the Mississippi a little bit. I have a client who has a deal pending in Denver. So maybe we'll move that boundary a little bit further west.
My name is Derek Zerfus with Colliers. I'm not prepared with any fun facts, so I'll say.
I was going to say,
Sorry.
I've been with Colliers for 20 years now, and I run the Lehigh Valley office. And we are a commercial real estate firm, and we handle everything from sales to development to leasing, retail, office, industrial, and everything in between.
Hi, Steve Bowell, also with Fitzpatrick Sabuba. My practice is very similar to Steph. I'm in our commercial real estate department. I work a lot in the healthcare sector and in the educational sector with institutional clients, but I do just about everything that Steph does. I have no fun facts, but I have a joke. And I mean, the fact that I'm up here with these really smart people is I need to tell a joke in order to deflect from everything else. So it's a holiday joke. So Mariah Carey's assistant doesn't know what to buy her for Christmas. So she's walking around. She's like, what do I buy her? What do I buy her? And Mariah Carey has everything. So there's a little undeveloped lot right in Malibu overlooking the ocean. And she looks at it and she says, I'm buying this for Mariah. And she buys it for her. It's undeveloped. Mariah can do whatever she wants with it. She walks in, she gives it to Mariah. Mariah unwraps it. She tears it in half and throws it in her face. And she says, I told everyone I don't need a lot for Christmas. Marie's clapping because I pulled it off. Marie McConnell was my test audience earlier this time. Gretchen, I'll leave it with you then.
Maybe how do I follow that? Oh my goodness, we got stuff at the bar. My name is Gretchen Peterson. I'm an attorney in our with Fitzpatrick Lenz and Buba in our firm's litigation department. With litigation, I like to say anytime there's essentially a dispute that arises between anybody, including individuals, companies, I step in to hopefully resolve that in some sort of way. Litigation, what I do ranges from breach of contract, real estate disputes, seller disclosure. But obviously we're here today because we're talking about commercial leasing. So I handle evictions when they go south.
Gretchen's what my mother would call a real lawyer. She goes to court.
I do go to court. So I am here to discuss when things go south for leasing purposes.
Perfect. And real quick, I'm Jimmy Honachik, president at YMI Insurance. We do commercial. We do everything from, landlords to the tenants. So that's kind of why I'm here. I also host a podcast, Why Am I Talking, where we talk to local business leaders. And so if you're a local business leader, let's meet up and see if we can get things going. But more importantly, why are you guys here? I want to find out why you're here so that we can tailor the conversation more to you. And unfortunately, Jarrett, you're right in front of me, so you're going to kick it off.
I've been involved in commercial real estate transactions for 20 plus years. And, I know the law is evolving, best practices evolve or should be evolving. So just inherently curious in the subject matter, want to know what my blind spots are, and maybe get into the mind of the user, who isn't practicing real estate every day, yet a user.
That's great.
My name's Ryan Dunn. We're a co-owner of Twitter Company, and I'm here because Jarrett was walking out the door. If you want to come with me, Jarrett shares an office at our office, and I said, sure, why not?
And Ryan, you see me sitting here and now you're saying, why did I come here?
That's perfect. We'll keep moving back.
My name is Maggie Riley. I work at City Center Group. So we are this commercial real estate landlord, and please aware what's maybe changing and please be aware of space.
Awesome.
I'm Kara Anthony. I'm also a City Center Group. I primarily work on the residential side, but I got a pink flag, so
I'm Christine Lott. I work at Stroudsburg Bank. I also have I mainly do a lot of the commercial real estate transactions today, small and large. We've been using Housing Group forever for decades. Also, I will just say Scott, Company Beach Polling, where I live, Los Angeles. Just be helpful. You don't know, sir.
Hi everyone, Uriva Calls. I work with Patrick Hudson Bula at Shared Corporate Business and Banking Group, but I also heavily practice in the commercial real estate sector.
Perfect. We'll just keep going back.
Colby Mary with Surprise and Fabian. We do a lot of property damage restoration for both landlords and tenants. Every job I do, I learn something about how it all works, and everyone scratches the surface up. Learn anything else about how it all works.
Awesome.
My name is Maddie Hughes. I'm heading at Summit, and I just got on
Congrats. That's cool.
Yeah. And I own a small residential real estate business. So I'm also Malcolm. Today, actually, this week, they're having the roof in place, and I do not want anyone to.
We love hearing roofs get replaced in insurance, so that's awesome. Thank you. Hey, we'll talk.
I'm Dan from YMI Insurance. I started recently in sales, so making connections. And I'm also working on getting my license, property casualty. So here to learn.
That's the cooler license, if anyone was wondering. All right.
Yes, my name's Chris. I'm just here to learn in real estate. So I'm a client of the OB, and I just thought it's interesting.
That's great. Yeah.
John Lyon, formerly of Michael Dunn Company. It was 21 years since I was with them. Went to Mack Trucks, part of Volvo for been in the Lehigh Valley for all of that time, but at different roles throughout the U.S., Sweden. But moved back to the area in 22 to go to plant operations. We do a lot of leasing, parking lot leasing included. We're a triple net Eddie on all of our leases across the U.S., Canada, Mexico. Yeah, it's obviously very interesting. You work with CRE, Richard Ellis, on Blyther a lot with our Freckle.
I went to high school, Sean.
Oh, interested in learning more about commercial leasing, any.
That's great. Awesome. Brooke?
Brooke, I do residential real estate for Berkshire Hathaway, but I also own a couple barn. My husband does commercial real estate, so trying to figure out what he's not telling me. He's working there.
Awesome.
Frank Matriani, humble residential real estate agent on this one here, but always looking to learn and expand. And Adam Love Cooker and Ryan, I'm here talking about it. Sounded like an interesting topic. And I knew some of the panel members, so I was like, I got to pump it up.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kat Biacco. I'm with Package Real Estate Advisors. We are a commercial brokerage firm that actually solely focuses on the end user. I actually spent, I guess it's probably almost close to 20 years doing commercial transactions at this point, and but the majority of it on the landlord side. So, love the perspective. I think it's really important for anybody going into a negotiation to understand, both sides and what the leverages are, and also where to find the right solution. So, looking forward to learning a lot.
Awesome. Go all the way back in the corner.
I'm Liz Urban, from an associate at Republican Haduga, and the real estate is corporate.
Perfect.
Barrett Kaplan, also associate at Stroudsburg. I work in the commercial transaction space. I do a lot of commercial work as well. Here's what firm and also learn from everyone.
Awesome.
Andre Search, I'm with Sarasota Team Davis. We have 4,800 franchises nationwide, and you with us in the Valley whole week. You can have you on and us as well. They're $7 billion each trip. A lot you order. I was invited tonight, and just see how we can support you guys and also learn, so we can help our customers as well with the rest of fire, water, all that.
Last but not least.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm just the marketing person here, but I'm also a commercial insurance agent at YMI. So I'm here.
Perfect. All right. That was great. Let's dive in. Let's not waste any more time. So, Steph, you've seen hundreds of leases across industries. What are some of the top trap clauses that tenants and landlords still overlook in 2025?
I'm going to focus on two.
Okay.
First one, as I mentioned, repairs. It's super important to really talk to your client, whether you're representing landlord or tenant, and understand what their needs are and what their risk tolerance for the cost of repairs are. That's not going to be the same across any lease or any client, landlord or tenant. For example, I had, one client who their risk, their appetite for risk, I'll call it, was so limited. They just, they were a small business. They were just getting started. They were an entrepreneur. They really had to have more of the repairs on the landlord. They have other clients who, they want tenant improvements. They want, they want to do all the work and make it their own space. So that's really something. Yeah. and that's great. And but the key thing is really understanding your client's needs. I have landlords who, they want to turn it over to the tenant. They want tenant to do basically everything. That's fine too. But then I have landlords who say, my name's on the building. So I want to make sure the building's maintained to the standard that suits my name and fulfills my needs. Because, the tenant wants to do it. But if they don't cut the grass nicely and don't trim the shrubs like I want them trimmed, I don't want people thinking that, Sam Smith Incorporated is the reason that the grass is trimmed and the shrubs aren't trimmed. So that's number one. And number two, and this happens in a lot of commercial and retail spaces, and more, exclusivity provisions. If you are Al Capone's taco shop, you don't want a Chipotle opening right next door to you. If you're Chipotle, you don't want Al Capone's taco shop opening next door to you. So if you're the landlord, you of course want the exclusivity to, maybe not be so broad. So you have a wider range of tenants you can go to. If you're the tenant, you're looking for a very broad exclusivity so you can preclude as many people who are as close to you in terms of business as possible. So those are the two things that I think, are areas that you really want to look out for, that I think particularly with the repairs, there tends to be section 14 or 15 in the lease. At that point, you're getting a little tired of reading those leases. And so, your eyes start to gloss over a little bit, but that's really a section. I always tell people, run through scenarios. The roof leaks. I'm going to look at the lease. What does the lease say? The plumbing goes, the HVAC goes. Run through scenarios and think about what you want and what does that lease say.
And how negotiable are those items if I'm the tenant moving in?
It depends on really what type of tenant. If you are a larger tenant with better assets, better financials, it's going to be more negotiable. You're going to have more leverage there. If you are newer entrepreneur, unfortunately, the leverage is going to be smaller. It also depends what the landlord's like. If you're dealing with a REIT across, that has hundreds of properties across the country, you're probably not going to be so willing to change their lease form. But if you're dealing with the smaller landlord who has one or two rental properties, you can pay attention to all their units, you might have a bit more leverage, even if you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
With all after write it down.
Let's write it down if you don't mind. Yeah. We'll keep moving.
Also, we'll all be at the happy hour afterwards. So if you have,
where I seriously hope they have tacos now because I just want tacos.
Derek, that kind of ties in with the question I was going to ask you is how can tenants and landlords best align lease structure, so term length, renewal options, with sort of their broader business goals?
I mean, that's very different for the landlord and for the tenant. They're coming at this from such different size and with different goals and what's important to them. At the root of it is oftentimes the rate and what that looks like. A tenant may want to lock in, for example, their rate for a very long time with an initial term and with options. A landlord may not want to do that, and that becomes strategically two different sides. A perfect example is the industrial market today. I mean, some of the tenants have renewals that are $5-6 a square foot when the current rate's 11. If you're a landlord, like, but listen, you don't love getting that. I'm going to exercise my option notice. So. I think obviously talking together, finding out what's important. The other big piece is just fit out dollars and how that affects the deal. Right now we have cost of construction is really, really, really high. It wasn't such a big deal years ago before COVID or even began, but now it's a serious issue. Landlords do not want to spend $100 a square foot just to put a vanilla shell together, and forget beyond that. So that's resulting in rents that become really high, even if they are willing to do it. They lately with the Rite Aid closures, this has become a really hot subject because we had these build-to-suit boxes that really inflated the rates. That now that they're vacant, the landlords are in a top position, not being able to achieve that same rent. So they're super sensitive to how much TI money they want to put into a deal. Tenants are looking at having built space out. It's going to cost them a lot more than they thought. So we have to try to figure out how we find a balance there. And, a lot of times it just starts with understanding what's important for each side and then coming up with a way to try to meet that. But rental rates and cost of construction are certainly, in length of term, locked in the stress, probably the biggest item right now that we're seeing.
All right, Steve, let's keep going on that. From a practical standpoint, what negotiation strategies or kind of fallback positions help clients avoid these sorts of disputes before they start?
So, Steph did a good job of hitting on some of those flash items. And again, with the TI allowances and things like that, number one is communication. I mean, build a team and build it early, right? I mean, it's the clients I watch get in trouble are the ones who involve educated, known professionals who know what they're doing in terms of valuing things and understanding what a good rate versus a bad rate, or what may be very, very nuanced terms. Anyone who signed a college apartment lease thinks they understand what a lease says. But once you're dealing with fit out, build out, maintenance obligations, triple net leases where there's going to be allocations of costs, it adds up very, very quickly. And I mean, too often people come to the lawyer, and this may be very, very self-serving, and they say, look, I have a term sheet signed, write me a lease. And we go through it, and then instantaneously there's 15 questions we have. And those things are still negotiable at that point. But I mean, build that team and build it early. And number two is hire professionals, either on the realtor and the real estate agent end or through an attorney that will help you understand every single paragraph of that document. Because, I mean, people tend to fixate on one or two flashy issues, and they're important issues. What's my rent going to be? You know, who's going to shovel the sidewalks? But there may be terms in there that could be either very disastrous for you down the road. You know, I mean, I work in healthcare, and I mean, there are these restoration paragraphs that Steph was talking about that, hey, at the end of the lease, what condition am I going to leave the property in? Okay, well, they're installing an MRI machine inside a room. The MRI machine is the size of this room right now. You know, how do they remove that machine out of a room? They're tearing out walls. And the lease was not reviewed appropriately, and if they were lawyered up and they wrote it the right way, they're knocking down a wall in your building and not paying you back for it. So, I mean, nothing's unimportant. And I mean, all the way down to what Gretchen does. I mean, there's confessions of judgment. There's litigation remedies. There's things like that you have to be very, very attuned to. Because, I mean, too many people are penny wise and pound foolish because they're so excited to get their startup going. Everyone wants to be in the space, and that's great. But I mean, I don't think we slow the process down. I think we get it done right. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Each one of you flowed perfectly into the next. And Gretchen,
for Gretchen.
Yes, we've all flowed right to you. So what would you say are the most common lease disputes that you see? And, you know, I know that documentation would help, but like, what can we be doing in terms of documentation to kind of avoid those?
So I view that there's two main types of lease disputes, right? The main one is non-payment of rent, right? You're just not paying. The other type is what I call other breaches. Other breaches can be not paying. What not paying can would be obviously non-payment, but not following through with your various maintenance obligations. Your, of course, I'm blanking right now. Assignments and subletting sometimes comes up, but more so what your obligations are to maintain the property. Those often come up most frequently. What are your obligations to, for example, maintain the HVAC versus your landlord? Or do you have to maintain the parking lot, or does the landlord? Who has to deal with the signage or the street lights or whatever? Those arise oftentimes because there's ambiguity in the lease, right? So leading back to what Steve was saying, it's really important to do your work on the front end. So in the event these issues come up on the back end, they're easier. That you can point to a specific provision in the lease to say, this is your obligation. This is our obligation. This falls under your obligation, not ours. And if you don't remedy it, then I can point to paragraph 12, which says I have a right to cure and you're responsible for those costs associated with that. And if you don't, then we can take the next steps.
Perfect. And you're the next steps.
And I am the next steps. I'm the middle steps and the next steps.
And the last steps.
And the last steps.
Yes. Steph, we're hearing a lot about communications and records. So what are some of the best practices for maintaining those to strengthen, your client's position if a dispute arises?
So that starts initially at the onset of the drafting of the lease. And I think Steve hit the nail on the head when he talked about assembling a team. So when I'm starting the drafting and assembling the team, it's usually the realtor, broker. We also involve the insurance people. I often reply back and say, hey, in fact, I just had one today. Section 13 is 5 pages on insurance and waiver of subrogation and all of that stuff. Have you talked to your broker about, is this adequate? This happened to be a restaurant lease. Are the grease traps I'm requiring and things, do those work? So as you're going through, don't forget your team and communicating. If there's a loss at the site and you call me, my first question is going to be, did you alert your insurance carrier? Have you worked through them? Is it a covered loss? Same thing with a slip and fall. If there's someone not paying rent or they paid late, my first question before I turn it over to our litigation team is going to say, okay. I'll share a quick story on this. I had a client call me and say, well, I worked something out. He's gonna repay me a little bit month by month. Famous last words. I work something out. Okay, that's great. You work something out. How about we do an amendment to the lease?
Yeah, right. Get it in writing.
Get it in writing. Well, he's a little bit, nervous about lawyers. We'll get it in writing, but you can only give me 1 page, and that has to include signatures. Okay, can we make the font size 8? No. But yeah, get it in writing. Document things. If there's a pattern of behavior, if I had one that dealt with failure to maintain, what Gretchen was talking about. Well, we reached out to him 6 times. Okay, can you show me those communications? Well, they were calls and voicemails. Okay, let's follow up with that email. Pursuant to the voicemail message I just left you about this, I've been trying to reach you on this date, this date, this date. The more specific you can be, the better off you're going to be if you need to go down the hall to Gretchen, her team. I always like to say, whatever you put in writing, that's Exhibit A to the complaint if you need to go after. Well, Exhibit A might be the lease, but
Exhibit B.
Exhibit B. So I always coach people, when you do put things in writing, be polite, be firm, and direct, and get all the key facts in there, because you catch more bees with honey than stew vinegar. Yeah. So that would be my.
If I can just interject, so I know you're asking questions, but following up with what Steph was saying, when things kind of start to go south, oftentimes before it gets to me, the landlord issues their own sort of notice, right? A couple things to think about when you're drafting those notices are, I presume that there's some sort of notice requirement in your lease, right? So make sure you find that notice requirement in your lease and follow that. Make sure it's sent to the right address. Make sure it's sent to the right person. Along with that, I suggest citing whatever is in your lease that is being breached. It is much easier because, like Steph said, it's going to be Exhibit B to the complaint. So to the extent that if this, again, goes south and the tenant says, well, I didn't have any idea. They didn't tell me. They just the landlord took it upon themselves to, didn't give me a chance to cure, right? They paid for it themselves. Now they're demanding money of me. You can easily produce this piece of paper in writing, that's in conformity with the notice requirement, spelling out exactly what they're doing wrong. Whatever timing requirement, if it's a 30-day cure period of time, cite pursuant to paragraph 12.1b, you have 30 days to cure. If you do not, I will exercise my right pursuant to paragraph 1201c of curing it, and then you're responsible for the payment of that. So make sure really the key document, as everybody knows here, is the key document is the lease. This is a contractual relationship between landlord and tenant. Now, there are what I will call default provisions in the Pennsylvania Landlord Tenant Act, but that's few and far between. It's really the contract between the parties that govern. So that is the document you need to go to first when something goes wrong. Get it in writing. If there's any sort of amendment, get it in writing, or else it almost doesn't exist.
That's great. And just real quick, while we're on insurance, the lease, like you said, is the key document, and that tells who's responsible for what party. Insurance is what's going to fund that when it comes time for a claim. And an area that I see people mess up a lot on the landlord side is not enforcing. Like if they have guidelines on coverages that tenants should have, not enforcing those. And, a small tenant comes in and says, here's my 1 million GL policy. Well, we want to see a 3 million GL policy or 1 million, but we want to see a $2 million umbrella. but letting that slide for whatever reason. And then it comes claims time and there's not enough coverage from the tenant, or the wrong kind of coverage is in place. And just because you have a cert doesn't mean necessarily that you have the right coverages in place, and the carrier will deny it. So it's making sure you have that good relationship with the broker who can kind of go through that with you. Cool. All right, Steve, let's get current, topical. Artificial intelligence is the buzzword for the past, year at this point. But how have platforms such as ChatGPT changed the process for lease negotiations? And is that positive, or would you say net negative?
Yeah, so one of my roles is I serve as the chair of the law firm's IT and Information Security Committee. And we're bullish on IT. I certainly personally am. And we're adopting these tools, and there's efficiencies within them. But what we're also seeing is a different trend, where just like in every specific industry, there's some platforms that are tailored, designed with the right databases. They're taught the right way. And the work product is relatively good. They don't create false results. But what we're seeing increasingly as a law firm, and Marie flagged this in one of our department meetings, is not overwhelmingly, but more frequently, we're getting an email from a client saying, listen, I took a first crack at the lease using ChatGPT. Can you just spend an hour and mark this up? And we look at it. And what I would tell you about generative AI, and I saw a speaker on AI in schools this morning, and she said the way they're teaching the kids in school is if you ask a bad question to AI, you'll get a bad answer. Mm-hmm. So if you go into AI and you plug in and you say, please write me a lease agreement with this much rent, whatever, and it'll spit out a reasonable document tailored around your request. What did it miss? All the nuance that everyone has been talking about here, ranging from insurance, ranging from, is this market rate? People think that it's a running start in the process, when oftentimes it's a detriment, because they beholden themselves to this form that was created by an algorithm and a large language model that may be very good, but usually those things are worth the money you paid for them. And candidly, as an attorney, what I'll tell you, Steph and I do the same thing, we usually don't start from scratch when we're writing a lease. We write dozens of them. We write hundreds of them. We have a pretty well-developed form that's been vetted through Pennsylvania law that it may not have been litigated because of our leases, but it's gone through the courts. And again, if you go into ChatGPT or any other generative AI platform, it's going to spit out a generic document, and it may look okay. And in fact, oftentimes I tell people that I put it on par with what usually a first-year associate would do. And that's not bad, by the way. That associate has $100,000 of education. They know the law pretty well. What don't they know? They don't know a lot of the nuance. They don't have the experience. They don't know what questions sometimes to ask. So, I'm very bullish on it. I think people should use it. And if I was on the client end, it's a great explanatory tool. My lawyer wrote this. I don't understand quite what this means. Most of them, if you put it in there, it'll give you a reasonably okay. I'm going to say, okay, still talk to your lawyer about it. But it'll give you an okay definition of it on quality control. That's what I'm very bullish on using it for. If I'm doing an amortization table, there's a reason why my paralegals do my math for me, but at the same time, the ability to run it through there and check the math, it's very good at that. So, I think it's going to create efficiencies, and I'm very hopeful it's going to create efficiencies, but it has to be in the right hands. Mm-hmm. And on the client end, use it. I'm bullish on using it. But don't take its advice over trained professionals, who know the market, who know the state law, who have written hundreds of these documents.
That's great. Yeah. Derek, while we're staying topical, what sort of trends are you seeing in terms of leasing pressures or rent pressures or things like that?
Well, I think if we start with retail for a second, shopping centers, strip centers, mostly, since a little bit before COVID and through COVID, there's been very little new construction for a number of different reasons. Today, the costs just really hard to make work. It's really hard to build a strip center and a shopping center and generate enough tenants and rent to be able to make that pegs up. And most of the time, it just can't happen. I decided I'm working on, and I have to tell the guy, even if you sold the land for $0 and gave it to somebody, with the amount of how expensive soft costs are, engineering and site work and the vertical construction, there are not tenants out there that are going to pay enough to make that work for you. And that wasn't always the case. So since that's been the case, let's just say since COVID, our market's back, our retailers are back, our business is back, but we've had so little new construction over all of those years that in retail now, there's a lot of demand and very little place to go. So you're seeing a lot of the maybe class B or C or existing centers get filled with tenants who normally would not have gone there, who had waited for the next Walmart anchor shopping center to open up to take a spot in there. That's just not even a thing anymore. It's the own market. So a lot of the existing retail centers, there's more demand for them. They're being backfilled at a much higher pace. Rents have come up a little bit, I guess. From a new construction standpoint, if somebody does come out with a new construction strip center or something like that, it's got to be such a good spot, that they can charge $45, $55, $60. I just worked on a deal which will come your way soon, and the rent is $60 a square foot for a 2,000 square foot end cap on a new construction strip center, because it just has to be. And no, this tenant is not a mom and pop tenant. They can make that work, but they don't have a choice. If they want to be in that market and they want to relocate their location, they have to pay that. Or they're going to have to wait for something second generation to come up, which isn't going to happen for them. So that's different. That's certainly new. The cost of construction is a big deal too. How you address we're doing a new project right now that is new construction only because it's mixed use and it's part of a multifamily project. And it's not that important to the overall scope of the project. So they had to do it because of the township. But we're running into a lot of problems with that because the tenants that are coming in, they can't afford, they don't want to afford to take a raw cold shell and build that out, just take to a vanilla shell. That's a new problem. In the past, it would have been just a non-issue. It just didn't cost that much to do that. The landlord would have just done it. Nobody wants to do it. So we're trying to figure out who's going to pay for this, for that type of product. So each one kind of has its nuance in retail, but that's a big change. In the last couple of years, it's shifted the landscape. So I like to tell people, if you have an existing product and you own something, you're going to be in a really good position, because I don't see all of a sudden something's going to change in the next year or two or three and people are going to start building retail centers. That's not going to happen. So whoever has existing product is going to be in a good place. For office, we see, call it a flight to better quality. We have people that might be in B or C office buildings, and now they can go to an A office building that has better amenities, better quality, for almost the same price, because that market's been so disrupted that, people are, I had somebody come to me, I had a 5,000 square foot space, and the person told me that they narrowed it down to like 7 and they were in a tour, but when they first did their search, they had like 55 spaces that were 5,000 square feet. I said, oh my gosh. They literally could reach out to every one of them and say, I'll pay you 30 cents on the dollar for your rent. And one person's going to say yes. That's a tough market right now. But we are seeing that, the Class A stuff is doing well. A lot of the Bs and Cs are seeing this as an opportunity to downsize, upsize, shift locations, shift better amenities, and be at a similar price. And then, warehousing, I think, is just a whole different animal that has a whole host of issues with supply and demand right now that's not getting any better anytime soon. The rates are double, what they were just a couple of years ago. I was talking to somebody recently, and flex spaces were between 15 and 50,000 square feet are $14 triple net a square foot. That's pretty much the same price as retail space right now, which is just crazy. And not that long ago, it was half that. That's a very new dynamic. There's a massive shortage, obviously, for industrial space too. So that's probably the biggest pressure right now for those markets, I'd say.
Yeah, and just to echo on cost of construction, that impacts insurance, obviously. So if your premium is increasing, take a look at, why it's increasing. And a lot of times, hopefully, it is the building valuation is going up, because that is not the market value of your building. That is truly the replacement cost, and the cost of construction has gone up. And so insurance has followed that trend as well. We just had a 15,000 square foot strip mall essentially come to us, and took a look at their current policies. And, I wasn't saving them money because I was showing them how underinsured they currently were. Their dwelling values hadn't increased with inflation or with the cost of construction. And so there is significantly underinsured. So that's something that's very topical and something to absolutely keep on the lookout on your policies and to have conversations with your brokers on. Gretchen, let's get back to you. It's been a while. When a lease breaks down,
yes,
how do you advise clients to decide between negotiation, mediation, or ultimately litigation?
Well, with respect to mediation, it's usually in the lease. And that's one of the things you need to consider when you are negotiating a lease, which is, do you want to include a mediation provision? I generally don't really like mediation provisions because I find them to be more of a hassle than a help, at least for commercial leases. The exception to that, I think, is now we're talking about leases, obviously, but a residential home purchase. I know the standard Pennsylvania agreement of sale does include a mediation provision. And for like failures to disclose matters, I find that mediation provision is very helpful and kind of allows a claim that might not be worth financially litigating, but there's something there to get resolved fairly quickly. That's one of the few exceptions to mediation. As a whole, otherwise, I don't really like mediation provisions in a lease because, especially when you put in an obligation like private mediation, like AAA or JAMS, they're shockingly expensive. And I don't think people realize how expensive they are. Now, litigation can be expensive, but those private mediations are very expensive and not always fruitful because mediation is only works if everybody agrees, right? Otherwise, you just went through a very expensive step that didn't get you anywhere. When determining, so it comes to a point where we want to figure out, do we commence litigation or do we try and get this resolved between the landlord and tenant? And I think obviously we should make best efforts to try and resolve it between the landlord and tenant initially. It becomes more helpful again when you cite the provision in the lease that they're breaching, right? Again, the language of the lease is incredibly helpful. So the more specific you can cite to the lease, the more leverage you have from a landlord perspective and for a tenant perspective, right? To support your position that you're in the right and they're in the wrong. So I'm always in favor of negotiating, but at some point negotiations just don't go anywhere. And then you have litigation, right? And litigation is always a last resort. And there are a lot of considerations like, public image, mom and pop shops, right? Like, do you want to help these people? We had a lot of issues coming up with COVID and rent abatement and that sort of thing. Try and work with the tenants, but at some point, enough is enough, right? And then you dive in litigation. But just because you dive into litigation doesn't mean the negotiations are over, right? I view litigation as no, this is serious. Like, you guys have to get out. But there are ways to continue to negotiate to encourage the landlord to get out, right? Waive some of the fees, right? Give them a little bit more time to move out, that sort of thing. And negotiations and litigation are not exclusive. They can run parallel to one another and occur at the same time. So it's just a matter of the landlord truly deciding when is enough. And then you initiate litigation, assuming they don't get out, while continuing to negotiate to hopefully achieve that end result that you would like without having to go through the whole litigation process to a trial. I would say, I think we need to discuss, maybe you don't have to, but confessions of judgment at the same time, right? Confessions of judgment for residential leases is not allowed. So don't bother with a residential lease. Commercial leases, certainly confessions of judgment are permitted, but make sure it is very clear in the lease. The more I know, it's just not worth trying to bury it in there because it's going to be overturned by a court. Bold, capital letters, have a signature next to the confession of judgment provision. Make sure it's clear whether it's a confession of judgment for possession and or confession of judgment for money, right? They're two different things. If you have a guarantor, and a guarantee, make sure that confession of judgment is also in the guarantee as well. So you can't have a situation where you confess judgment for possession and money against the tenant, but then you've got a separate action against the guarantor, right? You kind of want to consolidate them, make it easy as possible. So have the confession of judgment in the lease and also in the guarantee document as well. Obvious, bold signature.
All right, perfect. I have some really great questions for you guys still, and I want to talk more insurance, but this is for you guys. So I'm thinking at this point, let's keep Frank out. That's perfect. And we'll let Brooke ask her 20 questions, but also open it up to everyone. And, you know, if you run out of questions, I've got some more that we can ask, but let's see what you guys have in store. Yeah, kick us off, Brooke.
I'll just ask one right now. Regarding exclusivity. Okay. So if you enter into a lease and it is not stated, and let's just say Dunkin' Donuts, right? So I own a chocolate somewhere Dunkin' Donuts is there, and let's say it's not stated in there that I cannot serve coffee. Mm-hmm. Okay. Because Dunkin' Donuts is so huge, could that come back? And could they say something to the landlord or the building that they want exclusivity on coffee for me not to serve coffee in my store after the fact? I sign my lease, they sign their lease. So could they come back because they're so big and I'm so small, you know?
All right. So, number one, I've tried the truffle bar. It's quite good. Okay, I'm learning that with Dunkin'. But after the fact, they can't really come back and say, no, you now can't sell coffee. We didn't put this in your lease, but Dunkin' wants it now. But what they could do, and this is how I see it, it's not quite as blatant as that. They could, for example, a renewal is up for you. Mm-hmm. And they could say, well, your lease says renewals at fair market rent. This rent is fair market rent. And they'll have comps that support that. It won't be crazy, but it might be a little bit more than you're willing to pay. And so they'll say something along the lines of, well, you know, if you'd agree not to sell coffee, we could knock 50 cents a square foot off, and maybe they'll work it in that way, but they can't just come to you when, you know, you're current on your rent, you're not in default, everything's going well, and renegotiate your lease with you. That would be really hard for them to do after the fact. But I have seen them kind of renewals or defaults.
Yeah.
Yeah, or the other footnote I would say is, and Steph's right, they cannot impose a new exclusivity in the middle of your lease.
Yeah.
But many times leases will say in there that you will abide by reasonable rules and regulations imposed by the landlord. And that's the landlord's way when they write that in a lease of saying, hey, we may do different things that restrict your use of your property. An exclusivity they couldn't do.
No.
But could they make your life difficult around the edges on that? Mm-hmm. And parking is one of the ones where they restructure out to the parking.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's one of those things that everyone says, yeah, it's all right, reasonable rules and regulations. I've had clients that haven't even read them. But to that point, to the way that they want to renegotiate the lease and make your life difficult to do that, absolutely.
And
I was just going to say, typically when we see somebody like Dunkin' or Starbucks or Jersey Mike's, you know, request a hoagie exclusive, it's oftentimes tied to the primary use of another tenant. Mm-hmm. So one, I would say, like, is there any language to restrict you from selling that? Does Dunkin' have any exclusives? No.
So if my lease doesn't have it, could Dunkin's have it?
Well, Dunkin's could have an exclusive right as them being the only coffee primary use in the center, and they just forgot to put it in yours, or didn't know, or failed to add that, because they should have added that. They should have added that language to yours and said you need to abide by all the exclusives of the center. If they made the mistake and didn't include it,
they'd have a hard time.
So what could Dunkin' do to them now?
That sounds like professional liability right there.
Well, I'm just saying, because Dunkin's huge, right?
Well, also, I mean, then it also comes down to what do the exclusivity provisions in Dunkin's lease.
That's right.
So,
yeah, and a lot of times they're for a primary use.
Yeah.
As an incidental use, you're fine. Mm-hmm. Like a XYZ retail, a pizza shop could sell a hoagie as an incidental use. You just can't put another hoagie tenant in if Jersey Mike's primary.
Or a pizza shop. There's some pizza shops that you can grab a cup of coffee with your pizza if you're 85 years old and like coffee with your pizza. But yeah, also a lot of exclusivity, just so you're aware. A lot of them have provisions that if there's a tenant that comes in that you think there's a violation, there's some working out. It's not just immediately everyone gets kicked out and goes to litigation. So yeah, but and Derek's right. It's usually the primary use. So if your primary use was a coffee shop, that would then be an issue, as opposed to rather you're selling truffles and someone wants a cup of coffee or a chocolate bomb or something.
And real quickly, correction. In a timely manner.
Mm-hmm.
When that's put in a lease, you will provide something in a timely manner. How is that deciphered?
What sorts of things are you talking about in a timely manner?
The overage of, and I'm going to get my terms wrong. Again, my husband's the commercial person. I am not.
Yeah.
If the overage within a year, right, of the snow removal, like all the costs, okay,
I see.
the maintenance.
Yeah.
There's an overage, and all of a sudden there's a bill for $4,500, and they give you the bill because the person took ownership of the building a year and a half after. Isn't that a timely manner? Like saying you have to now pay the CAM overage from 2023 because we never gave it to you, but it's in a timely manner.
So this is a great example of making sure the terms of your lease are clear, right? That would be an example of something that's not clear. So that's where disputes arise, right? Your position is that you did X, Y, and Z in a timely manner. Landlord's position is that you didn't do it, right? If 3 weeks has passed and you weren't supposed to do whatever you're supposed to do, and landlord says you're in breach of the agreement, we are curing that on ours and you're responsible for payment of whatever because we had to do it for $10,000 even though you could have gotten it done for $7,000. That's an ambiguity. For purposes of out-of-court resolution, I think it comes down to a discussion between you and the landlord to make sure you're on the same page of what timely manner means. And whether that means adding an addendum to say, we are changing the timely manner language to say 30 days to cure or 60 days to provide payment or whatever it is, that's great. If it gets to the point where it goes to court, then it is the court's responsibility to determine what timely manner is. But those are the sorts of ambiguities you try and avoid in a contract.
Don't let it get there.
Don't let it get there.
Are you trying to say that the landlord is trying to reconcile your CAM from 2023?
That's not.
And Kate looked at it, and Kate said, basically Kate was like, could you say it?
Kate Durso?
Yeah. No. Kate
Curcio.
Yeah.
Whatever she said.
Yeah. I'm not trying to but she looked at it and she's like, you're not going to win this. But at the same time, I feel what you're saying, but you're not going to win this.
There's no definition of it. And the number of times you get a call from a client that says the lease says always timely do that. What does that mean? There's not a book I can pull off the shelf and says timely is defined in Pennsylvania as being this number of days.
Now, which I just think is,
sadly, you're not alone. We had that same thing come up.
Okay.
23 CAM charges just recently. We're like, what? It's been a year and a half.
But I think it's a question of is this the hill you want to stand on, right? Or are there bigger things that you kind of want to hold back?
Right.
And if it comes up, because the CAM charges are they're due when they're due, right? If there's a provision in the contract that says, because I know that sometimes in leases, there are provisions that say the tenant has the right to inspect the accounting of the landlord. And if the tenant doesn't do that within 60 days or whatever it is, the tenant is deemed to have waived their right to challenge the amount of CAM. So,
we actually weren't allowed to inspect, but the landlord who took over.
Yeah.
The stuff because he didn't know.
Right. So, that's,
okay.
yeah, it's an ambiguity issue. Right. And, like Steve said, you try and get ahead of these in the drafting, but it comes out.
Does that mean, I mean, that certainly sounds like it's not timely to me, but if that's...
If my lease is 3 years and it's a year and a half, you're giving me camp now.
So does that mean that we should not be using timely in any leases?
It depends on the context of the lease.
In the context. I mean, I'm not in a position to be saying, don't ever do this, but to the extent that you can clarify those, because there's, in every contract, there's, generally speaking, the courts read an element of reasonableness into it, right? But there is ambiguity. So to the extent that you can eliminate that.
Every client I represent always wants the paragraph on snow removal to say the snow will be removed within blank hours of whenever it's done. And every landlord is going to say, I can't write that because what happens if there's a 3-foot snowstorm? We can't.
Those 2 days.
And it was 2 days. Right. So in that circumstance, we say, hey, maybe accept timely there. A CAM reconciliation paragraph is usually one of the most best spelled out provisions within the lease. You will let me know by usually February with supporting documents. I will get back to you within 30 days. You know, I mean, it's very contextually based. Anything involving money, usually you want days attached to it. And I'm not saying time is acceptable everywhere, but by their nature, some terms have to be more fluid.
And there's an element of waiver too, right? But there's sometimes a term in the lease that says, you know, landlord's choice to not exercise its rights is not a waiver of, you know, its ability to enforce it or something like that, right? Yeah. So that's another thing that goes in the lease.
We've also seen plenty of leases where the landlord has to do a reconciliation by a certain date in the calendar year. So it's usually by April 30th, the camera will be done. It will be delivered to you, so that, you know, there may be an extraordinary case where come May and they're finalizing the snow bill that they can bill you. There should be some sort of definitive time frame for that. What we've also seen is that in certain operating expense provision, we have seen language put in where the landlord can't look back more than a year.
Absolutely.
And so there are other protections.
Oh, there's some review that takes over.
But regardless, they can't get the phantom tax bill that they forgot was in their filing cabinet and come back after that.
And I think sometimes as a compromise, then the tenant can't then also go back more than a year, right? So it kind of protects both sides. And,
You have a question, Robert, or a comment?
Question.
Okay.
Sort of. I was just wondering if you would recommend using the ambiguity from the perspective
to the benefit of claiming, to your benefit, claiming it as an ambiguity and essentially trying to force settlement, being that you're going to have to spend legal dollars to get this. I don't know how much it is, but, you know, out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a defense. The default provision, or the default law, is that contracts are presumed to be clear and unambiguous, and the language of the contract governs, unless it is determined by the court that there is ambiguity, and then you can seek external documents to interpret the ambiguity. To the extent that you're trying to leverage ambiguity as a tenant to generate a settlement, I don't, of all of the leverages that you can obtain to generate a settlement, that is certainly one avenue you can take, but I haven't generally seen that to be successful. All right. It's an argument to be made. But from a tenant's perspective, it would be better if you had a specific contract provision that said this is the landlord's obligation, not the tenant's. Because if it's ambiguous for the tenant, it's ambiguous for the landlord as well, and it doesn't really get any.
You spend a few $100 an hour to debate it with us and ultimately end up talking to her.
Yeah.
Make your lease clear, you know?
This seems like the perfect example where I, as the tenant, would put this into ChatGPT and say, take a look at this lease. And it would say, everything looks pretty good.
Yeah.
And then I would send it to you. And in 10 seconds, you'd be like, that's awful. And you need to change this. Yeah.
I wanted to know, for the reason, like Derek points out, the runaway costs of construction, and where tenants and landlords are kind of trying to find, like you said, balance between how much skin in the game am I putting in as a tenant, and how much does the landlord have a capacity to reinvest in their space to make it, just justified on market rent. Are you seeing, to the panel, are you seeing any trends with personal guarantees or stakeholder guarantees, people behind sometimes the empty tenant entity?
Mm-hmm.
Are landlords asking for more, and are tenants agreeing to sign something with a bit more recourse?
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing a lot more guarantees. I'm also seeing landlords wanting tenant financials way earlier in the game, and it's getting earlier and earlier. And they're wanting to see guarantor financials as well. And depending on the space, I think it depends. If you're in the position like Derek talked about, right, with a person that had 50 options for 5,000 square feet of Class B office space, there that tenant has a lot more leverage, because if you as a landlord go to them with a guarantee and, what would you say? I'll go elsewhere. Fine. But if you're looking at a space that's a desirable location and good for your business model, and you're the tenant, you're going to take the space even if the landlord wants a guarantee. I just closed a deal in Hammond, Indiana, tenant-occupied industrial space, 15 different tenants in it. 13 of the 15 had personal guarantees. So it's definitely, I'm seeing it more and more.
Yeah, I agree. It's absolutely a question of leverage. And I mean, again, a common conversation I have is if you have a single purpose entity that you just formed to operate this business, right, that owns no other asset, and you're arguing against the personal guarantee, you're going to have a really, really hard time. The landlord wants to see a living body that has assets that it can collect upon when the people like Gretchen are involved in this process. So, I mean, if you're Starbucks or McDonald's or St. Luke's or Lehigh Valley Hospital, you can shake off that, and that whoever would guarantee it. Sometimes there's other entities that guarantee it. But at the same time, I mean, if you are a startup business, and I mean, I have clients that struggle with this, you're going to have a hard time getting out of the guarantee.
Yeah. And some of the things we do, I am representing startups to try and help them as maybe a burn-off period on the guarantee or a limitation on the guarantee, cap.
What's that typically look like? And I know I'm asking you to make.
Yeah. Sometimes it depends. It depends on the term of the lease. If I'm broke with a 3-year lease, a 3-year burn-off is not going to do me any good. Mm-hmm. If I have a 10-year lease and it's a 4-year burn-off, that might do me, pretty well. Or if I cap the damages at 4 or 5 months of rent, thinking that, okay, 4 or 5 months of rent gives that landlord time to hopefully relet the space or, something like that.
We see 12-month rolling guarantee a lot.
Yeah.
So it might be like we'll personally guarantee it for the first 12 months, and then we'll have a 12-month rolling guarantee. So that if that tenant has a 10-year lease and at year 4, they come to you as a landlord and say, hey, we're out, we got to terminate. From that point forward, they're personally guaranteeing for 12 more months, which again gives that landlord some time to get it repositioned, released, and has some rent guarantee.
So they're guaranteeing performance, making rent payments, and any
from the time they get notice that they're going to terminate the lease.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Here's something interesting that's a twist on this subject, and I have not heard of this in this area yet, but it could be coming. So our guys in the Philadelphia office told us they just ran a study on all this is office related, but it could easily apply to any other category. They ran a study of all the downtown office buildings, and there's only 4 in the upcoming 12 months that are not going to be in some form of financial distress. So what they're now seeing is the opposite. Before a tenant goes into an office building, they're requesting the landlord's financials to make sure that landlord is in good state. It's that much of an issue there. I mean, it makes sense. Like, you're investing a ton of money in a space and you're investing in employees and training. I mean, if something goes bad on that building, you're in trouble. So I could see that coming here too. Absolutely. I haven't heard of it yet.
But you want to do the lease with the landlord, you don't want to do a plain lease necessarily with the lender that forecloses on the landlord. Sure.
I'd love to follow up on that because we see that a lot, and there are a lot of landlords that have buildings that are going into receivership, and CMBS loans are non-recourse, and so they're not losing a shirt off their back. And there are
They don't maintain it properly then.
So there's maintenance issues. So talking about self-help in certain situations, thinking about who's been the TI dollars into its space. If all of a sudden it goes in receivership, the lender is going to be choosing whether or not to finish that TI. So making sure that you have offset, maybe one absolutely, are all really important things to be thinking about as you go into that process. And it's coming. I mean, you can look at CMBS loans are public information, and you can see who's not paying. I think the real nitty gritty comes in when you're looking at private loans and not knowing exactly what's happening. We had a situation recently where a landlord retraded a deal before lender couldn't give them the money that they agreed to pay for the transaction. And we learned through that whole process of, even though they're not in default, they're now in a situation where they're not paying, enough to the mortgage to, pay off the loan based off of the NOI that's coming on. So
yeah, I've often wondered. I'm waiting for all of these. Anybody who built something 5 years ago or bought something 5 years ago or 7 years ago has a 3% interest rate, and they're now much higher. And a lot of them don't work today. Yet we're not seeing anything come to the market for sale because of that. And I recently asked a banker about this, and he said, "Oh yeah, we're just working with them until the rate's lower." And this has been going on for probably a year or two now that I've heard this, and I keep thinking to myself, like, that's not going to last forever. I mean, there's going to be a time where the bank's going to stop working with them, and they're going to have to do something, and something's going to happen with that building because that rate difference is huge. You can't just go change the rents on somebody that's locked in term for 15 years.
And depending upon what they refinance, who knows what value they refinance, right?
So another reason why somebody might be cautious about a landlord situation and the health of that building.
To research.
Makes sense. I've never heard of that ever before until recently.
So say from a tenant perspective, you have a personal guarantee and you're only like halfway through your lease. Is there any room for negotiation there?
I think it really depends on the specific circumstances. Or are you a tenant that has something that the landlord wants? Yeah. And that's where, when I'm doing these leases, I know Steve mentioned that, we have leases be used and be sort of fine-tuned. And that is true, but that doesn't replace talking to your clients and understanding their needs. Where are they scared? Where are their pressure points and what's going on? And also, to your point, where's their leverage? And thinking about the landlord and learning a little bit about, when I'm representing tenants, about the landlord. Where are the landlord's pressure points? What can I do to give my tenant some help, right? So that's a really factually specific question. I wouldn't say it's a heck no. You might have an uphill battle, but there may also be things the landlord wants or needs from you. I mean, to Steve's point on the rules and regulations, if you have a tenant next door to you, maybe that parking's always overflowing and you don't quite need a lot of parking. So maybe you could work with the tenant and say, hey, look, we're willing, there's 5 spots outside my space. I'm willing to allow signs to go up to reserve those for the tenant next door to make that a little bit more valuable for you. Does that maybe get rid of your bull guarantee? Probably not. A few parking spots, but you can get creative. The important thing is to really look at the facts and the leverage and where both sides are at. Maybe you have a landlord who's in financial straits that might be willing to do it, for some changing up of the rents a little bit that is still financially more lucrative for your SPK, that's the tenant, rather than you personally, that's here important.
Yeah, okay.
I just recently had a situation that came to me just like this. So a person built out their business in a pretty prominent strip center and, invested their own money, fully built out. We talked about the value of that before. They had a 10-year lease and they were into year 2, and it's a personal guarantee. So they were, just a mess over this. Like, we have to close this business. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I'm really glad they called me and said, what should we do? And it turns out that space is really desirable. And I had made 2 phone calls and had somebody that wanted to take it over from them immediately. So we were able to get them to assign the lease to this person who wanted to take it over, who loved the fact that it was already built out, that it actually was a slightly below market rent. They were so pumped to step in there, and it's a non-issue now. So the landlord approved them as a new tenant that the original tenant assigned it to, and everybody's happy.
And that goes to the facts of the circumstance. They were trying to get out of their guarantee because they needed to shut their business down. Maybe someone's trying to get out of a guarantee to free up a personal balance sheet to start another business. So,
and the interesting thing about that is, if she would have went to the landlord, she was able to sell this business for a little bit. But if she would have went to the landlord, he would have happily let her go, because he could probably get 20% more rent easily today from when that was structured like 2 to 3 years ago, and he knew that. So it just really was a non-issue, because there were great solutions to have her go out from both sides, really. So the personal guarantee never even became an issue.
Anything else?
One thing I will say is things become problematic when tenants.
Yes.
There's like a wasp or something. Just got really excited. When rent.
It was. Thanks, Steve, for your sacrifice.
But don't check it out to you going here. Just give him his knife.
Oh my God. You keep John for now. Oh, shoot. Does this go anywhere?
Anywhere. Sure. There you go.
All right. Any other insects? Okay.
So one thing
I can take the sweater off next. After that, we're done. Okay.
With respect to trying to leverage for a change of term because a tenant is having trouble with paying rent, it is better to be kind of proactive than reactive, because when you get into a situation where there's several months of unpaid rent, the landlord becomes much less willing to work with you. And then is, at least in my experience, more likely kind of just to shut it down as opposed to renegotiating the lease or doing a rent abatement or something like that. So
I'm 3 months behind on my rent. Can you get me out of my personal guarantee? Is not a conversation you want to be having.
So I would say if you want a negotiation, be proactive rather than reactive.
Perfect. Anything else?
I have a question that's not overly important in the grand scheme of things, but I've always wondered. So everything in a lease is a contract and enforceable, right? Yes. It's a legal document. So if that's the case, then why is the fact that you capitalize an entire section of confession and judgment any more important than just the regular type style of PAM section? I mean, if everything's enforceable, why couldn't it just be regular?
Because judges got tired of those cases. They wanted to make sure people were reading it.
Because, I admittedly, I have never read the history of confessions of judgment, but generally speaking, the courts hate them. They hate them. They don't like the idea that somebody's rights have been given up, because that's what a confession of judgment is, right? And I was just talking to one of our associates about this yesterday. When you have a traditional litigation path, you file a complaint, then there's an answer, then there's discovery, then there's motions practice, then there's, in theory, a trial, right? You have numerous opportunities to defend yourself. I think this is a timeline, a litigation timeline. Confession of judgment goes complaint, judgment, and it skips everything in between and automatically puts a judgment on that tenant. And in essence, it doesn't give up the right to challenge it completely, but it makes it much more difficult to challenge the grounds for eviction. There's a process to file a petition, like in two legal leases, there's a process to file a petition to try and strike the judgment as a result of the confession, but that's a little bit of an uphill battle. So I don't know the history of it, but I think that's why they want to make sure it's bold, because it's a matter of giving up your rights. It's the same reason why no notices, the waiver of notice to quit doesn't have to be bold. It's kind of better because it's giving up a right.
But I frequently get clients that say, oh, do me a favor, make sure the maintenance paragraph's bold and make sure they initial it. And I say, I'll do that. It makes it no more or less enforceable. But I mean,
notarizing a lease.
Please notarize, please have this notarized.
Witness
Sure.
line.
Yeah, there's certain sections where it is a legal requirement. Gretchen's right. I mean, the confession of judgment has to be initialed. Certain guarantees have to be initialed in a certain way. But at the same time, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's, wow, this section's in bold, this one's not. Is this one more important than that? No.
Yeah. I think it's essentially a giving up of rights and a dislike from the court's perspective.
Awesome. All right, all my leases bold.
But we work with Sean locally, we and Allie, and then we have our corporate deal in North Carolina. Why would we engage Fitzpatrick?
Well, so I actually work with a lot of clients who have their own in-house counsel. PPL being one of them, candidly. A lot of times, like for Mack Trucks, right? Your corporate counsel, where are they located?
North Carolina.
Yeah.
That was the other question.
Yeah.
Have leases all over the country.
Yeah.
Do we want to work with someone locally? Because you mentioned you're already doing things.
I do things all over the country, but oftentimes when I do, my clients also have local counsel because they'll line their general counsel that does all of their leasing, and they think of me, even though I'm not as like their general counsel. We engage local counsel. I actually have 2 right now where one's a facility in Forks Townships and one's a facility in Palmer. Well, they have their in-house national people working on the lease. They have me living on Pennsylvania-specific provisions, land development, zoning, and nuances that your corporate counsel, who's from Massachusetts, doesn't know.
We often do the same thing with law firms,
Yeah.
where someone uses a large law firm in New York, and they just need someone to look at that. I did this today for someone. And I mean, because leasing and real estate documentation can be very, very nuanced on state law. And especially when you're dealing with commercial, industrial, and things like that, where there are environmental covenants and things like that. Having someone like Steph or me or Marie or the number of attorneys in this room looking at it, there's benefit to that. Now, at the same time, many of our clients where we will represent them, like Steph, I do leases in Florida, I do those things. We do a caveat where we can't review it for that. We can't tell you about that state law. But certainly best practice. When I'm doing that, the first thing I always tell the client is, and I ethically have to say this, is hire an attorney in that state to advise you on that state.
And I'm personally, I think, pretty good about knowing like where my swim lane is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Staying in it. So if you're telling me, look, we have corporate counsel reviewing the lease for the general provisions. We're just looking for you to review plan development and local and state nuances. I'm good with that. Like, that's fine with me. I don't take offense to that. And you won't find a whole lot of duplication of work. Because if you do, you're not coming back to me for your next one, and I really want you to.
Well, and that's what I was about to say is, often the in-house counsel, a majority of my clients who probably have in-house counsel, they'll say, this is the pro forma document we're going to use in this state because we're going to open up 12 locations. Can you give us our comments for the pro forma document? And hey, we'll circle back with you as you're on each individual site. They'll do, I'm with Steph. Staying in your lane and understanding the role relative to general counsel or an outside law firm that does that work. We're very good at it.
And I think one other angle on this. So I do something very similar to SCAF for I'm doing real estate acquisitions all over the country. And my client does have a very large in-house counsel group, but they are over capacity. They just do not have the ability. And it's a lot less expensive for them to hire me as opposed to paying the benefits and the salary for another attorney on their team. So I end up in the role of, I do a review of all these contracts in different states, and I may be recommending to them, this is a time when you really need to bring in local counsel. We'll find a law firm for them, and we'll say, look, X, Y, and Z, or can you just look at these couple things? They also know me, they can send it to me, and then it's just the familiarity of always having somebody on your team who could just deal with it.
We've even had clients that they ask us to embed an attorney with their in-house counsel for a day a week, where they say, we want someone here on Mondays.
Oh, yeah, because you're talking about nuances to these lease agreements in Pennsylvania. Of course, it would make sense to have someone local there.
Well, and I think Steph's a good
You're
job.
dealing with real estate leases. My corporate legal department's dealing with, a number of legal issues not even related to leases.
Well, and Steph hit the nail on the head in the other aspect. I mean, universally, there's some zoning or land use aspect that a lot of cases were involved in, where knowing the zoning officer in Salisbury Township, when you're building the facility where they get a phone call from a lawyer in New York, they're bringing in the solicitor and the process is going to be a little slower and a little more, where Steph and I call those people a few times a month. Having boots on the ground to deal with those regional specific things, that helps.
Perfect. I'm going to shoehorn that into an insurance thing real quick. Employment practices liability, if you guys have it. You probably have an employment attorney, maybe Dave Steckel at FLB, or Jake Sitman, and you work with them. You work with them day to day on your employment issues, and then a claim happens, right? And you get a suit filed, and so you go to your EPL policy and you submit the claim. There are policies that give you choice of counsel, and you can say, I want Steph representing me. 9 times out of 10, if you haven't talked to your broker about it, they're going to assign you an attorney, and they're not going to be able to assign you Steph. So make sure you work with your attorney if that's something that's important to you, because Steph or Dave knows your situation better than they ever will.
I personally want Steph, I'll tell you.
David,
maybe reference, but you missed
Not for important.
All right, with that, thank you all for coming. I think food and drinks maybe are out there, but good conversations also out there. So thank you guys so much.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Why Am I Talking podcast. If you enjoyed this and want to hear more content from amazing personalities in the Valley, please subscribe, leave a rating, and drop us a quick review.